Here in Medjugorje, you know that every second day of each month, Blessed Mary giving us messages, and she telling us to be apostles of love. Mary's meal is apostles of love.
This is way more than a feeding and education program. This impacts people in such a massive way. A lot of them, they didn't eat at all in a day before they came to school. Now they're motivated to come to school. They're motivated to be part of that community. They eat, they can focus. Now when you speak to them, they're saying, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, education suddenly becomes like a possibility.
I had a great chance to be a gangster too, but fortunately, I found Mary's Meals and I found education. And Mary's Meals feeds me for almost 12 years. So I am now started to have a new dream and realize that I can become something good than becoming something bad.
And when you go into these communities, from the fathers to the mothers, the children, they can't wait to get up and say, this has really changed our lives,
Has impacted our life, he has changed the children's attitude, he has created higher achievement rate, and he has transformed their life.
It's quite hard to fathom, just how quickly this has grown and to what extent.
Its source is Medjugorje, and wanting to respond to Our Lady's call to holiness there.
In the early 80s, as a teenager, I went with my brothers and sisters to Medjugorje, and it really changed our lives in lots of different ways.
It just, I think, confirmed all those kind of hopes and dreams that, yes, it was absolutely true, that in our day, at this time, Our Lady was appearing to us.
It was the grace of knowing that our Blessed Mother was with us, and the grace of knowing that our whole life in some very subtle way was going to change. We knew from that very first visit that there was going to be a fundamental change in our life, and all that we had to do was to trust our Blessed Mother and to do God's will on a day-to-day basis, and it would unfold for us what exactly she had planned.
And one of those ways that my mother and father felt that God was asking them to turn our home into a retreat centre, into a family house of prayer. And that was a wonderful thing, a huge gift for us. All these amazing people started to come into our home. And then, the years went by and the war began in Bosnia, and that was a horrible thing for all of us, something we never could have imagined.
I think there was a particular sorrow in our hearts because it was a place that that meant so much to us. It was where Medjugorje was. I think we began to realise the enormity, perhaps, of Our Lady's plan here.
We began talking about the idea of trying to do something small to help. And that led to all of us launching just a very little appeal, asking people for basic things, for food, for clothing. And all this stuff started to come in here. And I asked my dad if we could borrow his shed to store these gifts that were coming in. And somebody gave us an old Land Rover, and we loaded that up and we drove to a refugee camp near Medjugorje, and we delivered the aid. When I came back home here, I found this mountain of food and clothing piled up here and continuing to pour in. So at that point I prayed about it and I thought about it, and I decided to give up my job, and I sold my house at that time, and somebody gave me a truck, and I just simply began driving back and forth to Bosnia. Then over the years our work began to evolve. We began to get involved in building homes for abandoned children in Romania, health clinics for people in Liberia during their terrible civil war. Lots of different things, but no real theme or focus to our work.
And then in 2002 we were beginning to read reports about this terrible famine that was afflicting Malawi.
And we went to Malawi for the first time that year, and I met a family in one of the villages. The mother of the family was dying, and her husband had already died. And then I started talking to her oldest child sitting beside her, and he was called Edward, and Edward was about 14 years of age. And at one point in the conversation, I said to Edward, Edward, what are your hopes? What are your ambitions? And he looked at me and he said, I'd like to have enough food to eat, and I'd like to be able to go to school one day. And that was it. That was all of his ambition at 14 years of age. Edward's words really hit home to me, really made me think about that more. And so very soon after that, we began. We began Mary's Meals, that simple thing of providing one meal every day in a place of education for the hungry child, so that you meet the immediate need of that child for food, but at the same time you tackle the underlying cause of poverty by enabling them to come into the classroom where they can get that education that can set them free. And I really felt almost like that's what God had been preparing us for all these years before that.
I'm so happy that Mary's Meal exists, because knowing Blessed Mary, staying with her so many years, I learned how mother she is, how much she's suffering because of us. And I am sure that she's smiling when she looking Mary's Meal, because they helping for those who are really need.
It is an amazing thing to think that today well over 1 million children are eating Mary's Meals every day.